Alrighty guys, welcome back to another little video where today we are going to be having a little discussion about the used computer part market in 2021. So let me get a few things out of the way first. Yes, the market is not very good right now, primarily because of COVID and a new mining boom. And because of the mining boom, the graphics card market has become more expensive, where all of the graphics cards that are above 4 gigabytes of VRAM typically are selling for quite a bit of money. And the 4 gigabyte and under graphics cards, because that's pretty much what's being left for the gamers, have also gone up in price because, well, the miners are buying up all the higher cards, while the gamers are now buying up all the 4 gigabyte cards, meaning that a lot of the only viable cards are 2 and 3 gigabytes. But that is kind of a thing that we're going to look at here today. So let me just first and foremost kind of show you what I mean. Let's look at the GTX 970. This, a year ago, would have been a $100 graphics card. And you can see right now, buy it now for $175. That is a $75 upcharge. Now you can find them for about $150, $190. Actually, that one's about $200 with shipping. That one's being bid on for $220. But as you guys can see for like this one, even though it's still a little bit better, it's still not like great pricing. Even a like Alienware blower style is still going for like 160, which just seems ridiculous to me in my opinion. Now something like this lime version, the green version, I would expect to see about 180 on because those are more of a collector's item. But a standard superclock like this should not be going for 175. It's ridiculous like this. And someone like this actually thinks he can get $500 out of his graphics card. That's just wishful thinking, buddy. Sorry. But as you can see, these are just far overpriced, far more overpriced than what you would expect to see on something like a 7 or a 970. Let's go one tier higher up. Instead of a 7. Instead of a 970, let's go 980. And as you can see here, a basic 980 Founders Edition goes for $210. Now that's a 4 gigabyte graphics card. Well, the 980 Ti's, what I would expect to spend $200 on, are going for about $300. That's just astronomically overpriced. That is $100 more than what I spent on mine. And I have a WinForce Extreme, one of the nicest 980 Ti models you can buy. Now this, it's still overpriced, but it's a little bit better. It's, as you guys can see, it's ridiculous. The market right now for something like this is just ridiculous. But now let's look at another graphics card that most of the time you'd be able to find really cheap. RX 480. 180 USD. What is this? This is ridiculous, and it's a 4 gigabyte too. You would think that no one would really be buying something like this, but people are. And it's just ridiculous. Now, this is an 8 gigabyte. This guy thinks he can get $300 for, and there's a decent chance he will. If miners decide that this card is worth it, they'll probably pay that price for it. I know that's ridiculous to say, but, I mean, to be totally fair, miners are worse than scalpers when it comes to graphics cards. The only difference is that when the mining market crashes, then the graphics cards end up in the market again for far cheaper than what they would have otherwise been. And that's kind of one of these bright sides here. As you can see, the price of these things are still astronomically overpriced. But when the graphics card market crashes again, which it will because of the mining craze, we will essentially go back to the way things were with graphics cards being underpriced. And yet again, $220 for an MSI RX 584 gig. That's yet again just way more than what it used to be. 8 gig being $325. Yet again, far more money than what it otherwise should be. Now, let's go to something else. GTX 1070, shall we? Almost $300. $280. And there's a lot of people buying them. $280. let's see, where are some of the other ones? That's kind of a niche product, so that technically doesn't count. 780 or 780, 1070 Ti, 450. Got the water-cooled variations. Granted, though, yet again, more of a niche market. And 1070 Ti Duke. Or 1070. Yeah, it's 10. Wow, I cannot even English anymore. These graphics cards are just far overpriced compared to what they should be. And it's just ridiculous. Even down to the 1060s. A 1063 gig goes for 180. I mean, this graphics card a year ago would go for maybe 120. And I know that the 1060s have always been overpriced, but they're not worth that kind of money. That's straight up, they're just not worth that kind of money. But there are a few graphics cards that actually haven't been completely destroyed. Let's look at the 780s, shall we? The GTX 780, while not being the greatest graphics card in the world, admittingly so, they aren't actually getting slammed by prices. I would have expected to spend about $100 on a GTX 780. And about 130-ish to 140-ish for a 780 Ti. Now, the 780 Ti's are overpriced, but the standard 780s aren't actually all too bad. And being the fact that both the variations, being the 780 and the 780 Ti, both have 3 gigabytes of VRAM, if you can find a 780 Ti, it's a pretty decent little card. And even the 780 is still a pretty decent little card. And that is the price that I would have expected to pay for one. And I've spent that much money on multiple of them. Now, granted, I didn't buy the blower styles, but that's still not a bad card for that $100 price point. Even something like this, actually with shipping, that's overpriced. Let's see. Now, this 780 with 780 with the super clocked cooler on it for only 130. I'd probably spend the extra $30 to get the super clocked cooler. Overpriced. Yeah, wow, a lot of the stuff I'm talking about, yet again, I just kind of got to put my foot in my mouth because, yet again, these things are not great. But they're not as bad as what they could be. They're not as bad as what I've seen in the past. Let's go over to the R9 290s. Now, the R9 290s, yet again, is one of my favorite graphics cards. This thing will compete directly with the GTX 780. And, as you can see here, they're about that same price. I'm going to warn you guys, though, do not buy a blower style of the R9 290s. They are very, very loud. But, as you can see here, something like the DirectStudio 2, it's only being bid on for $65, and no one's bid on it yet. $150 for the Tri-X. That's yet again a very good cooler on a pretty decent graphics card for $150. That obviously way overpriced. That one's way overpriced. Ignore that. Yeah, yet again overpriced. I'm just trying to look and see if there's anything that's actually like a decent value here. I mean, obviously you can find a few of them for decent prices, but still not great. Now let's go over to the R9 Fury, shall we? The R9 Fury is a personal favorite of mine, and unfortunately, the R9 Fury is yet again a little bit on the overpriced side. Actually, the R9 Fury X for $200 is not bad, but that's a water-cooled card. So you'd have to do water cooling if you actually wanted that. But, $225. That's more than what I would have spent, probably. But nowadays, that's actually not half bad. That's overpriced. That's overpriced. Way overpriced. Overpriced. Not by much, but still overpriced. So, the R9 Furies, you might be able to find some kind of good deal on them. What about the R9 390s? Yet again, we're falling into the category of way overpriced. Like, I would never spend more money on an R9 390 than what I would for an R9 Fury. The R9 Fury is faster, and the R9 Fury X is even faster than that. So if you can get an R9 Fury X for that price, then I'd buy the R9 Fury X. Don't buy an R9 390. That's way overpriced. And miners love these cards. I don't know what it is about the R9 390s, but miners love those cards. Let's go over to the R9 380s. Now, these ones have less VRAM, so typically they're a little bit better priced. Yet again, another graphics card that I'd probably accept to pay $130 for something like this. Not great, obviously, but it does have a newer architecture. So something like that would be decent. Alrighty, now let's go over to the R9 280s, shall we? The R9 280s, yet again a graphics card that hasn't really been affected all that much by the prices. Granted, this is another 3GB graphics card, and under $100 is what I would aim for. So something like this, XFX variation, or this one, the Sapphire variation, not half bad. Heck, even something like a Direct CU2 for $100, not great, but ultimately not bad either. And another GPU that I wanted to talk about that is, well, a 4GB, because if you're going to be looking at doing like AAA title gaming, you're going to want either a 3 or 4GB card. GTX 770s with the 4GB of VRAM. What the heck? Why you do this? There we go. GTX 770s with the 4GB of VRAM. This is overpriced, but this would actually be a half-decent card if you could get it for a lower price. Okay, so the GTX 770 is actually one of the fastest, if not the fastest, 2GB graphics cards. And they sold variations with the 4GB of VRAM. Now, if you can buy one with the 4GB VRAM buffer, it's not actually half bad. Yes, it could be better, but it also could be a lot worse. And you can sometimes find them for relatively decent prices, like $120-ish for a 4GB 770 on the superclocked variation. That's not bad. Granted, I would not spend $200 on something like that, but $100 would. I don't think that's exactly a bad deal in my opinion. But granted, that is just me, and my opinion could be, well, honestly, wrong. But with that being said, graphics cards are only half the equation. You really also need to take into the account of like what kind of computer you actually want to be using. And DIY stuff, being the DIY motherboards, have gotten more expensive. Stuff like the Ryzen CPUs and Ryzen motherboards keep getting more and more expensive because of the now dominance of Ryzen in gaming, meaning that all generation of Ryzen CPUs are becoming far more expensive. So, with that being said, let's take a look at some of the other options. And the first option I wanted to look at was a Dell Precision T1600. Now, this is essentially an LGA 1155 platform, just with the more powerful, a little bit more beefed up Dell Precision motherboard instead of a Dell Optiplex motherboard. Not really a whole heck of a lot more, just a little bit of a different shell, but still the same basic principles. And these ones are actually designed to be able to take the Xeon. So something like the E5 1270, which would be the i7 2600 variation, would go perfectly in a system like this. And you can buy that for like $110-ish with shipping and taxes. Well, how about a newer variation, something like the T1700? Now, I haven't personally used anything like this, but yet again, it falls into the same category as the original like Dell Optiplex idea of buying a computer. Granted, for something like this, you would need to get the motherboard adapter. It's like a 24-pin to, 8-pin power connector for the Dell motherboard. But you could put in a standard ATX power supply into here as long as you got that little adapter. And yet again, same premise, just this one is a V3, which means that it is a 4th generation CPU. And I believe this is actually the i5, it's like the 4th generation i5 variation. So yet again, not great, but not bad, especially when you consider the fact that it's under $150. Actually, wait, no, that'd be about $150 now that I look at it. Sorry, NA math. Okay, let's go and look at another one. Now, this actually intrigues me because I know that there are a few people that have done custom builds out of this tower, the Dell Optiplex 5040, but this is an i7 6700 with 16 gigs of DDR3, a 1TB hard drive, and Windows 10. Now, yes, this is $300, and is it really worth it to go up to a 6th Gen i7 compared to something like a 2nd Gen i7? Well, that one kind of is up to you. But to be totally fair, something like this, it has a far newer platform and has a couple more modern features than something like an older i7 that might intrigue people into being able to buy something like this. Now, I believe you'd have to use an SFX power supply with an adapter in there to actually get it to work properly, but with that being said, you could still build a pretty decent gaming computer out of something like this with a little bit of modification. But granted, then you get into case modding and possible garage hackery, I guess I should call it, when it comes to building something like this. So maybe not the perfect solution, but still, for $300, getting a 6th Gen i7 is not half bad. And the final one. This is a Dell Optiplex 790 with an i7 2600, 4 gigs of RAM, and a 500 gigabyte hard drive for the price of an i7 2600. Well, okay, I guess I shouldn't say that. I think the i7 2600 is like $80-ish. So for only $15 more, you could buy an entire computer attached to that processor. I think that's a pretty good deal, don't you? Now, the i7, the i7 2600 is probably, in my opinion, one of the most ideal CPUs for one of these budget entry-level gaming PCs. It is a fantastic little CPU, and a tower like this would be a fantastic little starter computer. But with that being said, you'd have to put in a new power supply, but luckily this is a 970, so you wouldn't need to have any extra connectors. You just put in a standard ATX power supply, and if you really wanted to put in a large graphics card, they have a a hard drive cage right in the front here, which you could then drill that out, because it's just, I think, 4 rivets holding it in. You simply drill that out, and you can put in literally whatever graphics card you could want. And with it being an i7 based system, it is 4 cores and 8 threads that runs at like 3.9 gigahertz all out. So, is it the greatest thing in the world? Not exactly, but it is a very good base model. It's a very good starting point, and to build a decent computer out of it, you wouldn't be disappointed. I can personally say from personal experience, CPUs around that power level of the i7 2600 are not half bad, and especially when you can get something like this for relatively good pricing. Well, there is also the DIY option, but like I said, the DIY motherboards are getting more expensive, for the most part. Now let's look at... Excuse me. Now let's look at something like x79 motherboards. Now the Chinese x79 motherboard has literally exploded stateside. And I am happy about that, because let me tell you, x79 DIY motherboards that are like this for the $70 to $90 price point are phenomenal values for money. And something like this Asus ROG Rampage is good for like actual legitimate overclocking, but if you just want to drop in a CPU and a graphics card and RAM and just run with it, something like this would be overbuilt. When having one of these essentially remanufactured server motherboards for less money would give you still very, very good gaming performance, and you don't need to have a DIY motherboard or like an actual originally manufactured motherboard. Something like these like these Chinese motherboards are really good value for money. And I believe that I'm a decent authority to say this because I literally use one on a daily basis. I even use one as my GPU test rig. And I can honestly say I have not exactly been disappointed by any of them that I've ever gotten. In fact, I have more Chinese motherboards than I have standard traditional motherboards. And yet again, I have another one on the way, so, Yeah, just let that one sink in for a minute. I genuinely love these X79 motherboards, and something like the X58s and the X99s also kind of fall into that same category. The X58 motherboards are typically less value for money, and then these original DIY motherboards are starting to get a little bit sketchy. I've had quite a few of them just crap out on me after only a short time of usage. So take that with a grain of salt. I know that I'm kind of hard when it comes to overclocking on them. So I've had some bad experiences recently where both my Sabertooth and my EVGA for the Win 3 have been giving me a lot of issues. And I don't have any of those same issues on something like these X58 Chinese boards. Granted, these aren't even the good X58 Chinese boards. These are just some X58 Chinese boards, but I digress. Go over to X99 for a higher end platform, and yet again, these are DDR4 platforms, but they are phenomenal value for money. I personally have not tested any of them, but being able to buy a motherboard like this, buy a overclockable 6-core or an overclockable 8-core, and just have some fun with it, that's pretty good value for money. And pretty good, well, use of money when you can get such good performance out of, well, really not a whole heck of a lot of input. But that has just kind of been a look at the market for today when it comes to early 2021 and, well, computer components. I know this video has not exactly been action intensive or anything, but thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you all guys later. Peace.